The rain fell in silver threads that night, soft, steady, and endless. In the middle of that fragile downpour stood Xiao Zhan, a man who no longer knew which world he belonged to. His reflection shimmered against the puddles at his feet, sometimes human, sometimes something else entirely. The clock behind him struck 12, and in that single sound, reality fractured. When the light broke through, he wasn't alone. A silhouette emerged from the fog. Wang Yibo, dressed in black, his gaze sharp and unreadable. Lightning cracked above them, cutting through the mist like the blade of time itself. Yibo tilted his head, eyes narrowing as if trying to remember something just out of reach. "Finally," he murmured. "You crossed over." And just like that, the story began, between two worlds that should never have met. The world Xiao Zhan came from was one of order, color, and rhythm, an endless loop of days built on peace and purpose. But beneath that perfection lay a truth so dangerous it had been buried for centuries, that their world was merely one half of a whole. The other half, Wang Yibo's world, was a mirror turned inside out, a place of shadows and silence where time didn't flow forward but folded inward. In this dimension, people lived through echoes, and the stars didn't shine, they whispered. For years, the two worlds had existed unaware of each other, divided by what scholars called the veil. Yet something had begun to shift. People were vanishing, voices fading mid-sentence, and memories dissolving like dust. The balance between both worlds was collapsing. Only two souls had the power to fix it. It began with a dream, one that both Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo shared, though neither could explain why. In that dream, a vast bridge of light stretched between the skies, connecting their separate realms. At its center was a mirror, and when they reached out to touch it, their reflections switched places. When Xiao Zhan woke up, the sky in his world had turned crimson. When Wang Yibo opened his eyes, his shadows had begun to whisper his name. Days later, Xiao Zhan followed a trail of music, a faint melody that no one else could hear. It led him to an abandoned observatory on the edge of the city, where every star in the sky seemed to be pulsing to the same rhythm. There, amidst ancient telescopes and broken glass, he found a small glowing orb suspended in midair. As he reached for it, the orb pulsed once, and the walls dissolved into mist. He fell through light, through time, through memory. And when he landed, it was on black marble beneath a storm of violet lightning. Across the vast expanse of that world stood Wang Yibo, sword in hand, eyes gleaming like fractured galaxies. "You're not supposed to be here," Yibo said, stepping forward. "Neither are you," Xiao Zhan replied, breathless. "But we're both here anyway." Their eyes met, and the air trembled. In that moment something ancient stirred. There was a prophecy whispered among both realms. When the twin souls meet, the worlds will either unite, or collapse into nothing. But destiny was not a thing either of them believed in. Not yet. For now, they were strangers standing on the edge of infinity, forced together by a force neither could see nor fight. Yibo's world was vast and unkind. The sky was permanently twilight, filled with drifting ruins of cities that once thrived. Time folded over itself here. People could walk for hours and end up where they began. And yet, in this strange chaos, Xiao Zhan found beauty. Glowing trees with silver leaves, rivers that ran upward, and creatures that existed halfway between thought and form. As they traveled together, searching for the source of the veil's fracture, the tension between them grew electric. They were opposites in every sense: light and shadow, warmth and frost, empathy and instinct. And yet, something unspoken connected them, something that neither world's logic could define. One night, they camped beside a lake that reflected both skies, half of it golden from Xiao Zhan's world, half dark violet from Yibo's. "Do you ever wonder," Xiao Zhan asked, "what would happen if the two worlds merged completely?" Yibo didn't answer right away. He tossed a small pebble into the lake and watched as ripples crossed both halves, blending light and shadow together until there was no line dividing them. "Maybe that's the point," Yibo finally said. "Maybe they were never meant to be separate." Xiao Zhan looked at him then, not as a stranger, not as an enemy, but as a reflection. And what happens to us when the worlds merge? Yibo smiled faintly. We stop being fragments. But destiny had already chosen its path. At the heart of Yibo's realm stood the Mirror Gate, a colossal structure older than both worlds combined. It shimmered with threads of time, pulsing with an otherworldly rhythm. To repair the veil, one of them would have to step through, and one would have to stay behind. It was a cruel symmetry. Two souls bound by connection, forced to separate to save everything. As they approached the gate, a storm began to form, time itself shattering around them, memories from both worlds colliding in flashes. Xiao Zhan saw his home fading, colors dissolving into mist. Yibo saw shadows collapsing into light, his people disappearing one by one. The universe demanded balance. I'll go, Xiao Zhan said, stepping forward. No, Yibo's voice was low but firm. This is my world. My burden. Your world doesn't end with sacrifice, Yibo. It ends with choice. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Yibo reached out, pressing something into Xiao Zhan's hand, a small shard of the mirror glowing faintly. If you cross over, Yibo said, his voice breaking, remember me in both worlds. Xiao Zhan's eyes glistened. I will. Always. And before Yibo could stop him, Xiao Zhan stepped through the gate. The explosion of light that followed could be seen across dimensions. The skies of both worlds erupted, merging into a swirling cascade of gold and indigo. The rivers reversed their flow, the stars began to hum, and the two realms began to fuse, not in destruction but rebirth. When the light faded, everything was still. The bridge between worlds was gone. And Wang Yibo was alone. He stood by the lake where their journey had begun, watching as dawn broke across a unified sky. The lake reflected both suns now, one from each world, and for the first time their colors danced together perfectly. Then, as he turned to leave, he heard it. A voice, soft, familiar, echoing across the wind. Yibo! He froze. There, in the reflection of the water, Xiao Zhan smiled, faint but real. His form flickered like light through glass, but his eyes were the same, warm and steady. You kept your promise, Yibo whispered. The reflection nodded once, then faded into the dawn. Years later, people would tell stories of how the skies had once been divided, how the rivers once flowed in opposite directions. But few would remember the two men who stood between worlds and rewrote fate itself. Yet in every sunrise, in every twilight where gold meets violet, their story continues. Two souls forever intertwined, existing not in separate realms but in the same heartbeat of the universe. The rain that night was heavier than before, each drop like liquid glass, slicing through the veil that separated two universes. The city lights below flickered uncertainly, as if aware of something colossal moving just beyond sight. Somewhere in that electric silence stood Xiao Zhan, watching the horizon shimmer between dusk and dawn, between what was real and what wasn't. The air itself seemed to hum. He could feel it, the pulse of another existence pressing against his world's fragile borders. Ever since the first time he crossed over, nothing had felt right. Shadows moved without sound, time skipped a heartbeat, and sometimes in his reflection, he could see Wang Yibo staring back from the other side of the glass. It wasn't haunting, it was connection, and yet, something about that connection was changing. In the days that followed, the world began to unravel in small, impossible ways. The sun would set twice in one evening. The wind carried whispers in a language no one could understand. And in the middle of crowded streets, people would suddenly stop, eyes vacant, as if their minds had slipped elsewhere. Xiao Zhan had seen it before. In Yibo's world, where time folded back on itself like a broken film reel. But here, it was spreading like wildfire. He needed answers. He returned to the abandoned observatory, the place where he had first crossed over. The once dead telescopes now glowed faintly, their lenses aimed not at the stars, but at a rift splitting the sky. It looked like a scar of light, beautiful, dangerous, alive. He reached out to touch it. The world tilted, and in an instant the room filled with mist and stormlight, and Wang Yibo stepped out of the rift, his black coat trailing behind him like liquid night. His expression was unreadable, half relief, half warning. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "Neither should you," Xiao Zhan replied, his voice quiet but steady. They stood in silence for a heartbeat, two figures from opposite realities, each glowing faintly with their world's light. When they finally moved, it was not with fear, but with understanding. Something greater than both of them was coming. The rift began to pulse, its light expanding. Reality around them wavered, walls melting into clouds, floor turning into fragments of starlight. Through the chaos they saw visions, flashes of both worlds colliding. Cities half dissolved, oceans inverted, people flickering between forms. "It's starting," Yibo whispered. "The merge." Xiao Zhan clenched his fists. "Then we stop it." Yibo's eyes flicked toward him, sharp, storm-colored, determined. "We can't stop it. We are it." Xiao Zhan froze. "What do you mean?" "The prophecy," Yibo said, stepping closer. "Two souls bound across dimensions. When they find each other, the worlds will fuse through their connection. We were never meant to fix the veil. We're the reason it's breaking." The words hit like thunder. The air between them sizzled, and the rift above grew wider, sending streams of energy spiraling around their bodies. Light from Xiao Zhan's world intertwined with shadow from Yibo's. Two forces dancing, fighting, embracing. They tried to pull away, but the connection only grew stronger. Every heartbeat brought memories that weren't their own. Xiao Zhan saw flashes of Yibo's past. His world's dark sky, the endless twilight, the loneliness of silence. And Yibo saw Xiao Zhan's laughter, his warmth, his defiance against destiny. Two halves of one whole. Two souls caught between creation and collapse. The observatory couldn't hold the energy. The ground cracked open, and light surged upward, tearing through the roof. The rift began to collapse inward, forming a sphere of pure energy, a heart made of both worlds' essence. Yibo staggered forward, shouting over the roar of the storm. "If it reaches full alignment, everything will vanish. Then tell me what to do." Xiao Zhan yelled back. Yibo looked at him, truly looked. "We have to let go." "No." Xiao Zhan's voice broke. "If we separate, one world will die." Yibo took a trembling breath. "And if we don't, both will." Lightning split the sky, striking the sphere. The entire room glowed gold and violet. They were running out of time. As chaos swirled around them, Xiao Zhan stepped closer, face illuminated by the storm. "If there's a chance we can save even one world," he said, voice low but fierce, "then let it be yours." Yibo shook his head. "You always say that like your life doesn't matter." "It's not about me," Xiao Zhan whispered. "It's about us. About both of them." He reached out and pressed his hand against Yibo's chest, right where his heart beat beneath the chaos. "I'll carry your world inside me if I have to. That's what connections do. They survive." Yibo's eyes softened. In that instant, time seemed to stop. The noise faded, and all that existed was the fragile heartbeat of two souls standing on the edge of infinity. Then Yibo took Xiao Zhan's hand and placed it against the glowing core of the rift. "Then we end it together," he said. The moment their hands touched the light, the explosion was beyond comprehension. The observatory shattered into fragments of stars. The sky bent backward, folding into itself. Colors that didn't exist in either world bled through the air, gold merging with indigo, forming something new and beautiful. They weren't falling or flying, they were becoming. For a brief, breathtaking instant, Xiao Zhan saw every possibility at once. The two of them walking side by side through both skies, their worlds united, their connection eternal. And then everything went white. When the light faded, silence followed. Xiao Zhan opened his eyes to a horizon unlike any he had ever seen. The sun and the moon shared the same sky, casting shadows and warmth together. The rivers ran upward and downward at the same time, and every sound felt like a song between worlds. He stood at the edge of a lake, the same one they had once camped beside, but now it reflected both realities perfectly. And when he looked into the water, he saw him. Yibo. Not a reflection. Not an illusion. But there, standing across the lake, smiling faintly. "You made it," Xiao Zhan said softly. Yibo tilted his head. "We both did." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Two figures no longer separated by distance or destiny, but bound by something larger. Understanding. Their worlds hadn't ended. They had merged. And in that fusion, something new had been born. A single realm where light and shadow danced in harmony. Far above them, the sky shimmered with the remnants of their collision, now frozen as a permanent aurora. An eternal reminder of what it took to bring two worlds together. People who saw it for the first time would whisper stories. Some called it the twin dawn. Others called it the miracle of the veil. But those who truly understood would simply smile because they knew. Somewhere within that light, Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo still walked together, not as legends, but as living bridges between realities. Sparkles if you were moved by this breathtaking continuation of Tween Worlds. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps us bring more powerful tales of love, destiny, and connection straight to your screen.